welcoming the world of strong women in IT. Today, amazing three global leaders, men leaders, and this is a kind of first time ever in the history that the strong women in IT is welcoming the three men speakers to talk about inclusion and shaping the equal world for women and men in the world. I'm so happy to welcome the three speakers representing America, Europe, and Asia. By the way, we also have with us today the participants coming from these three areas. So welcome to all of the women and men present with us. We have quite a strong men representation. So I really hope that your reflections will also help them to be more inclusive and shape an even more inclusive world. My name is Małgosia Gryz. I'm a moderator and host of today. I will have an honor to ask you the questions and also build on what you say. There might also be questions coming from the audience, and I will be happy to share them with you, asking you for your reflections and adjusting to what people want to hear. I am the vice president officially of Strong Women in IT. Normally, I am a hardworking woman who was always sharing the passion for people, technology, being a mother and a wife at the same time. And I do believe that this world needs women and men for shaping a better world for us and our children. And I'm super happy to listen to your stories. By the way, I know many of you from my own experience. You've been either my global or regional leaders, and I had a chance to watch you in action. You've been my directs, and we've been shaping together a world of inclusion. And you are also the entrepreneurs whose reputation is really great at the market. There is one thing which is common for each and every of you. This is that you never divide the world into the great men and not so great women, or the other way around. Whenever having conversations either with you or with your directs or people who know you, who are around you, they always say that you really demonstrate an inclusive mind. So the participants here with us today, Vahe Torosian, the global leader, executive with over 30 years of experience in his live studio from the United States, who was shaping Microsoft globally for many, many years. He was going through different roles, starting from the marketing role, and then being a business leader of the applications globally. And now sharing with us his story and also going through over the past, for the past 30 years, what he really achieved and what are his reflections on the topic of building an inclusive world. We have Bartosz Łopiński, who a bit more than 20 years ago decided with the other passionate people to start as the entrepreneur. Today, a global company, Millennium, who counts more than 1,800 people. He's holding a position of the global CEO of the company. And having the women and men reporting to him and shaping his company has got a lot to share. Vahe is bringing more than 30 years of experience from the IT industry. Bartosz is bringing 25 years in the IT industry. Now, time for Asia. Eric Magdato, the country head, Lingaro Philippines, who's been advocating for shaping the cultures of growth as the other two, but also inclusion and creating and shaping the equal chances were always important for him. He achieved a lot of successful moments working for Lingaro over the past 5 years. Prior to that, being in the big corp organizations, such as IBM or SAP. So, Eric, almost middle of the night in Philippines, in Manila. Bartosz, 5+ in Europe, in Warsaw. And Vahe, 7+, close to 8 in America. I'm really delighted to be your host today and ask you about what's really on your mind. But prior to going to my questions, I also want to encourage the people around us to be brave, to ask questions, to be curious. And Justina Burkhardt, our project manager and the one who is helping us to go through technically very well today, will gather them for us. Don't be shy, be engaged. It's our time together. There is one personal comment which I really want to make here. And I know there are many women here who know this special person. Paweł Jakubik, the person, the colleague, the friend, the leader who's been shaping really an inclusive world for many years now, he would be with us today. Unfortunately, because of his personal health situation, which many of you, I'm sure, are aware of, won't be with us today, fighting with cancer and waiting for the surgery, which is going to happen in a couple of days from now. Paweł, on behalf of Strong Women in IT and many people around, agreed with the founder of Strong Women, and being the advocate of many women and men, I wish you to fight, to be successful with this fight, and be my speaker in one of the upcoming sessions in autumn. All fingers crossed, and I'm sure that 3 leaders here wish you also the best. Now going to the questions. The first one which comes to my mind naturally is, how was it with you? I know your stories. I know you by person. Many people, women and men, know you. So was it really your natural skill or embedded into your DNA since you remember that you decided to be the advocate for inclusion and equality in the business? Or you really had to learn it over the past years? Vahe, I would start with you.
Well, first of all, Małgosia, thank you for having me and us. It's a fantastic pleasure to see you again after so many years. I mean, your question is an interesting one. I think, when it comes to me, I think that, you recognize my accent is a French accent, but my roots are from Armenia. My first language was Armenian. And was basically, I think I was trying to belong, to the society I was in. My first name was not a French name, so it's very clear that people identify you as someone slightly different. You don't speak like them, so you want to do every effort to be seen, to be visible, to be accepted, to belong. And I think this creates a lot of, let's say, interesting, element for the way you shape yourself, how you are sensitive to the others in the future. And then, of course, when I took some global experiences, having the luxury and the blessing to live in many, many different places, you realize, in fact, the importance of all these, let's say, invitations, for people who might be silent, because you remember, and I think that has been shaping a lot of who I am in the future in my global leadership roles.
So Vahe says, if I got you right, that it is a part of your roots, if you can say, right? It was obvious for you because your story is super diverse, but you also want to pay attention to the ones who are extroverts, introverts, to engage them into the dialogue, right?
Yes.
Give them a space on the decision and discussion table. You say there are differences of people. We come from with different roots and experiences, but having the voice of the ones who differ is so important.
Yes, I think that in business, most of the time, I always try to make the impossible possible. And I think when it comes to the human capital, you want to make the invisible visible, right? So that's the essence of the inclusion.
Yeah, I love it. Make the invisible visible, and make this world more inclusive. That's so true, and I think so important. So, building on your story, I would ask Bartek for his reflections. So, how was it, Bartek, in your case? Was it natural, embedded, or you really learned it over time?
I think both, because as far as diversity is concerned, I always was open for new landscape, because I was sharing my childhood between Poland and Switzerland when my father lived for quite a while. So and it was back in '90s, so that this landscape was completely different. Poland was in completely different place than Switzerland. So having in mind that there are different worlds around us, and being open for this diversity was very obvious and also embedded in me. Since I have technical background, it wasn't that popular to have women at the university, nor at the beginning of my journey in career. But I have had a luck to my first two bosses actually were women, fantastic people, not only better programmers than me, but also better chess players. So that's something at the very early age I realized what is this force of nature, and what is the scale of capabilities that can be handled. Nevertheless, my journey continued, and our vision of becoming global company, because when we talk about diversity, I think in including women, it's the easy part, because we are so, as an industry, there is still imbalance in this. So we are not naturally welcoming women, but as far as diversity and inclusion, there are so many differences, like cultural, you name it. It's variety, and that of course bring us to challenges, because I think we are not talking about diversity. I don't think we are really diverse as far as our opinions, and I think this is what's all about as far as diversity is concerned. It's about agreeing on different views. So I think along the way during this webinar, I think we should maybe, even though it's not an Oxford debate, I think we should spice it a little bit and maybe challenge some theories about diversity and inclusion. But I'm not only natural, but also learn a long way what's the great importance of inclusion, which is far beyond women and men.
Still, thanks for sharing. And I cannot agree more with what you say. Still, today we are rather, focusing on this part, because indeed you are absolutely right that diversity and inclusion is so much broader, right? Bartek, you said that for you it was in a way natural, right? You shared your story about the early 90s and how it looked really. And you said one super important sentence. You said many important, but one which I captured especially. You said, it's so obvious that we include women into our landscape. Is it? Statistically, women represent only 25% of the total IT population. If that was so obvious, I think we would have a slightly stronger representation, right? As you gave me the voice and said, let's challenge each other, I'm saying I am challenging. Not every company looks like Millennium, right? Because you achieved, I think, almost 40% in your balance. And I tell you, there are stories when women still feel excluded from the landscape because of different reasons. Sometimes we do it ourselves, though it doesn't seem so obvious for market of business people as a whole yet. So I want to build on. Yeah.
Can I respond on this?
Yeah,
Because
of course. Let's debate.
It's very interesting, because I'm also prepared as far as statistics are concerned. I have both our internal millennial statistics that shows how we are growing as far as percentage of women in our entire landscape. Of course, it differs from role to role. If you look at programmers, it's not that similar if you look at other professions and to be strict back office. But if you look at the percentage of females studying IT,
that's growing.
It's first of all, it's growing. Second of all, it's still way lower, for example, than in millennium. What it means actually is we are practically doubling in terms of percentage the number of women from if there is like 13 to 15% only women on technical universities, and it's now over 30% higher in millennium. That means that it's simply matter of time. So what we should be doing, rather looking at statistics, we should rather encourage women to study technical universities and technical skills, rather than encourage them to work, because it's simply there is not enough women available on the market in this IT sector.
So let me park it for a while, because I want to get back to this discussion and have your broad view of all of you, right? Hear your voices. As the moderator, I can say I fully agree with you that, and by the way, there are programs and initiatives which support this big way. But I also want to say, or I shouldn't use but, not to be the Batman Gosia, but still saying that the IT is not only programming. IT is much broader. Where we could add value is much broader. Though, of course, the most important part or the natural backbone of IT is programming. Though I think we could do many other roles super successfully if we are given a chance and we take this chance. But let's park it for a while. Let's hear the voice of Eric. I don't want to exclude Philippines from this discussion. Mr. Magdato, Eric, so I know your numbers. They are really impressive, but Bartek is right that life is not only about the numbers, though they really make a difference, especially all of us are coming from data and analytics spaces, right? Mm-hmm. So, Eric, what's on your mind? How the diversity and inclusion was growing in you? How did you develop it? Was it natural? Was it inherited? Was it educated? Did you educate yourself in this context over the past years?
Well, first of all, thank you very much again, Gosia, for having us here. I'm really thrilled to be here with Bahe and Bartosz. Now, for your question, I think it's a real combination of all the things that you mentioned. Even at an early stage, I was shaped during my growing up years. I was probably privileged enough to have been made aware of the workplace D&I stories coming from none other than my mom, who was a working mom. Her struggles, I know her struggles. I know her own discrimination stories. I know how she was able to rise above these challenges and even succeed in an IT world which was dominated by men, right? So I think I was a witness to how she endured and eventually was able to become a successful leader of one of the biggest utility companies in the Philippines. So fast forward to my own professional experience, So even at the beginning of my career, my journey, I was fortunate to have worked with many great leaders in IT in my other companies. Right, so that has helped me shape where I am right now, my advocacy, and now I'm fortunate to belong to Lingaro, which gosh, that it's an
You don't
organization
know
that
it by
really
heart.
supports an inclusive work environment, sustainability, and having this clearly in the agenda of our company strategy. Right, so for me, it's awareness at the beginning, at an early stage, and then learn more along the way.
Eric, thank you so much. You say it's awareness, it's learning on the way, educating myself, educating the others, right? But you also shared that you looked into your mom's example and experience and pains. And based on this, you said, okay, so I want to do something different, right? Or differently if I am given a chance. And I think it's so powerful as well, because looking into someone's challenges or issues and saying, if I have a chance to shape and influence the world, I might be different, right? And be more inclusive. Is this what I heard from you? Is this what you
Exactly,
said?
Gosha. The awareness that I had even at an early stage really built the way I perceive things and how I should be, how I should also act, right? When the time comes.
Thanks a lot. I would go back to Vahe as Bartosz started an interesting discussion, right? Or shared his challenging and open point of view, which is great because this is the discussion about. So Vahe, how do you look at it? About this context of looking into the women in terms of education, looking into the percentages in the current IT space, looking into how we could really make it better, or how do the leaders, from your perspectives, look at it?
I think you need, Bartek was right. It's but regardless of the efforts that have been made over the past years, across the board, the fact of the matter is that roughly globally there might be a gap of, I don't know, 8-9 million of female talent in the broader high tech environment, right? So that's a fact. And so I think that everything has to be, my learning was more being intentional, explain the why it's important to have a diverse and inclusive culture in a company or in your team. uh, Avoid the shortcut most of the time, and it's not badly intentioned, but male leaders might be under the pressure to try to deliver on something, and so when you get to a pool of candidate, the statistically it's easy, or it's easier to go to the shortcut and say, oh, I have enough male in the pool, I'm going to pick that one, and you don't give a chance to a balanced and diverse, let's say, pool of candidates. So I think that explaining the whys, connect in fact the diverse environment as part of one business lever, as opposed to have it somewhere different. You say, well, I have an aspiration to develop, grow, gain market share, have a geographical expansion. Well, one of the KPI should be diversity and inclusion, and then you bring that conversation. So then what does it take to get there? And then collectively you try to almost help people to recognize what is exclusion, and most of the time it's the mismatch within the experiences of people. And then you put somehow in fact what are going to be the non-negotiables, because if we all agree that the ultimate way to be successful is to have a balanced, diverse, let's say, organization, then everybody has to work for it. And it's not a quota aspect. The worst thing is to think as a quota. It's not a quota. You have to really, it comes from the heart. It comes from the belief that if you have a diverse organization, your innovation path is going to be, pace is going to be stronger. You're going to attract more, let's say, talented, resources, and you will be much better shape in the long run. And actually, that's, I think, the starting point. Remove all the bias. I know we are talking about training or learning on the go. I mean, I went through a lot of, let's say, unconscious and conscious bias, because sometimes you are not even aware of how you behave, and you want to really rally people to help them step back, reflect on their own behaviors, or and when I was talking about invisibility and visibility, or making the mission impossible, it's because I think sometimes people suffer in silence. And you want to help the male leader to say, hey, watch around yourself. You are in a meeting room, some people might not talk, might not raise their hand. You need to invite them, and it's not only male, female, it could be cultural differences as well. But as a leader, as a male leader, even more so, you need to lead, from the front, and lead by exemplarity. And I think that's to me a few thoughts.
Thank you. So, picking on your statement, you said that one of the key components is really acting against exclusion, right? And you say first you should have the definition of exclusion. What does it really mean? And listening to this statement, I would ask Bartek, who really brought this context of the inclusion or diversity and diversity in a broad sense, very rightly. Bartek, so what does the exclusion mean for you as the shaper of the company rolling globally?
Well, I think it's very obvious. I think it's good time for me to mention that in Malaysia, which is perfect example of diversity, we just crossed the number where we have more women than men. So there is over 50% of
so
women.
So you will have a rebellion from your men soon.
Yeah. So what exclusion means from that perspective is probably we should be limiting number of women hiring. I was just kidding, because from my perspective, what's the most important thing in diversity and inclusion, it's about equal possibilities, not equal outcome. Because we must also not forget about the diversity. It's not about being equal. It's about leveraging on those differences and really acknowledging them. It's very important. I think, especially in so-called Western culture, if you look at majority of the biggest companies, probably Microsoft would be the one. The culture of diversity and inclusion, it's already well established. It's part of compliance, and in this group of people, I don't think we have to convince each other that it's absolutely essential, that there's statistics proving that it's not only about healthy organization, it's not only about performance, it's not only about innovation, but it's also about the revenue and profit. So from my perspective as entrepreneur, it's simply very pragmatic to have this diverse. Even from that reason, not mentioning about the values of the companies, which are of course the core and pillars, it's foundation of the company as organization. But as we are taking it for granted, and we are starting to push those regulations, not to care about the values and the organization as such, there is a huge risk of failures, which is I used of course a ChatGPT to discover more about it, and there is a term of tokenism as far as diversity and inclusion, and that means that we are pushing it. So we are pushing outcome in order to have this balanced scorecard, to have the KPIs and number fixed. And actually, it's very related with the exclusion. So actually, using very noble values, which is diversity, we are actually excluding some people because of not really flourishing the culture, but rather pushing the numbers. And that is tokenism, which is getting more and more talked about as a threat for real diversity. So I think it's also time now to not to follow certain rules blindly, but to educate why we do it, because it's not about equal outcome, it's about equal opportunities for everyone.
This is, I think, two of you, Vahe and you, Bartosz, you talk exactly about the same. Vahe, correct me if I'm wrong. Vahe was saying, let's rather focus on creating and shaping a culture which is really coming from our natural belief and the heart, right, of having the diverse organizations. You, Bartek, also brought very rightly that it's also a pure economy fact, right? Not even talking about the cultural context, that the diverse organizations, by the way, some say that it's they are getting 16% better business results, the other even up to 30%. So I saw both, right? But you say we have to be very careful not to exclude by shaping some KPIs which people might not really understand. Vahe stated, and I take it and want to be vocal, let's explain and talk to people and answer the question why, and keep repeating and keep finding the answers, engaging them into the boat, right? So, Eric, how does it sound to you? What's your view here on this broad context which Bartek brought to our discussion?
I want to double down on what more and more companies are doing right now, which is having diversity metrics like scorecards and targets as part of the KPIs, right? After all, what matters is what we are measuring, right? We all know we're running businesses, but there, I know that this is very important for us to measure, but there are also challenges when we only focus on the metrics. I think that overly focusing on that kind of approach actually de-emphasizes the very thing that is that we want to build, right? An inclusive workplace, the awareness, connection, empathy, and mutual respect in the workplace, right? So I think as we solely focus on just metrics and forget about really telling the stories, really engaging with people, the exchange of human experience via stories, or having focus groups in the workplace, listening to these sessions, I think this has a practical impact on the culture of the company as well. So on a personal level, yes, we should focus on having those metrics, those diversity and inclusion metrics, but we should not forget about the human aspect, the human experiences, telling these stories and sharing these stories with the people.
Thank you, Eric. So what you are in Philippines, and I will now use one of my favorite words, salamat, which means thank you. You say that metrics are super important because what doesn't get measured doesn't get done, but let's make it human. Let's get the people experience and embed it into the final measurements, right? Otherwise, they are so much disconnected and people don't have the answer to the question, why?
Right.
Building on it, I really wish to hear from Bartek on what would be the do's and don'ts that you would like to share based on these 25 years of your experience with our audiences to give the women a place at the discussion table. And I would ask this question. I wish to hear your advice to the men. And then I would ask Vahe the same question. What would be your advice to the women? What should we continue doing, or even be even braver in doing to dare more? And what should we stop doing to be more successful? Bartek, so the question to the men, or your advice to the men.
My advice, I think it's very self-explanatory, because if we will take into account that there are also biological differences, which is obvious, and I'm not talking about physics only, but I'm talking about the brain, the mental approach, and it's actually proven that women have different capabilities, and it shows that people are handling more soft skills, which means in general, I mean in general, because of course there are some cases which is not the case, but if we look at the average, probably women are interested more in working with people, and that's a great strength. And this is why including different people within organization, we gain complete view. If we will look, everyone will look at the same part of the picture, our view is simply incomplete. So what it means, that brings great huge of risk that we will simply miss something from our view. So it's not only giving us performance, but it also brings security to the organization, not to miss the risk or miss the opportunity. And as soon as we will start to look at a very complex organization that could consist of hundreds or thousands of people from different backgrounds, from different beliefs, it really reshapes the picture and the view, and also direction of the company. And I would suggest to make it as complete as possible, not to miss risk and opportunities, and that is very pragmatic approach.
Thank you. So what you really say is that we, the women, bring this context of emotional intelligence, right? And you say, gentlemen,
among many others,
many others, yeah, because we are super well educated, yes. We bring also, but you say our emotional intelligence, I mean the women one, is making a difference in shaping the company, the business, and integrating the people around the same goal to move further. And by the way, many researchers, which we see also in Strong Women in IT, are showing that the emotional intelligence is one of the key components of the successful organizations, not only to achieve the short-term goals, but to build to last. And I think this is what you bring, right, to the table. So, dear gentlemen, if you didn't yet realize, gentlemen who listen to us, if you did not yet realize that we bring this context of emotional intelligence to help you shape an inclusive and successful organization, you better start looking at it. Vahe, so what about you? If you look into us women, what would you had the influence on development opportunities for so many of us, including me. So what should we, by your eyes or in your eyes, do more? And what should we stop doing or do differently? What advice would you give to me and the women who are present with us?
Yeah, and if you allow me, Małgosia, maybe to add on top of what Bartek was mentioning, one somehow cliche I've seen in many male managers when it comes to female and talent is to assume or to somehow think that the women are less committed to their career. That's wrong, and I think it's just a
Not
wrong.
at all.
Right. And so that's something I wanted to log, because I think it's a kind of a cliche I've seen so many times. To your question on women, I think that, I would say maybe one thing, and you can play the do's and the don'ts to some degree, right? Depending on how you take this thing. But I would say first, be yourself, and I always, my first, let's say, conversation is always to give the confidence, to reinforce the encouragement, because women talent are there, for a good reason. It's not by luck. They are there for a very good reason, and it's most of the time because of their abilities and their talent and the background. So we need to reinforce that, and I think it's important to make sure that people are absolutely clear on that one. Then often we have seen that. I've seen that. I'm sure Eric and Bartek as well, and maybe yourself, Malgosia, in your interaction. When you do an interview, I always felt, in average, it's not always true, but in average, women talent have the tendency to punch a bit under their weight. They are humble. They will say, hey, these are the experiences I don't have. Maybe these are the skill set I don't have. And they undermine themselves, I would say unfairly, compared to sometimes male talent who are always over their, punching over their weight, almost giving so strong self-confidence that we know it's not true, right? So I would say encouraging them to realize how much they know that maybe they're not aware of. And, that's more about what they can bring that is important, and the connection. I think that's the number one thing. Another one piece I would say, I think don't be shy, connect, outreach, create a allyship with others, male or female leaders, people who can inspire you. Actually, I even felt that sometimes mentorship is nice, is great, but the more you put in, the more you get. Don't expect the mentor to give you everything on the white sheet. I think over time, I felt that sponsorship is even more important than mentorship. Identifying the people, maybe male or female, leaders who are going to give you that sponsorship at the time you will need. And don't be shy of, let's say, to ask for help. It's not a weakness. It's just an ability to be connected and work as a collaborated mind. You are, in general, more creative, than, let's say, many male I've seen. When you see, a challenge, I always appreciated the fact that even if there are rules, when you see that nonsense, you go and you solve the nonsense because it's nonsense. While, sometimes, and that's the kind of, let's say, skills, that I've seen flourishing over time. And I think that getting the empowerment, asking for the empowerment to demonstrate what, your capabilities, I think that will be the number one thing. Be intentional about what you want to achieve, ask for help and support, define, in fact, the right people that you can connect to, and get from there. I would say that that's a quick summary.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. And I looked at all of you. You've been taking your hats, which means you really agree with each other, right? So ladies who are present with us, first, don't mix being humble with not understanding your strengths and being able to articulate them, right? That's lesson number one. And that's what's coming from the global leader who's been really shaping or influencing the careers of many of women. Second, build your smart network. Be able to use it in a proper way. Get a career sponsor if I'm quoting exactly, and have someone to support you, right? Someone who is helping you in your journey, and be clear about what you really want to achieve, right? That's these are the three things which should really help us to be even more successful and our voice to be heard. Anything to add from your side, Eric? Is there anything that you say you so much want to add to this what was stated?
I'd probably go back to the advice for men first before the women, if I may.
You do.
So
You may
I,
definitely
I
may.
I'd start with the individual, looking in the mirror. I think it is about um, our self awareness, understanding our identity, how we perceive ourselves, and our reactions to to various realities and experiences of other people. So this is about looking inwards and seeing our own blind spots. So that's first. And then secondly, it's of course looking out, seeing and recognizing the discrimination, prejudice,
Biases.
exclusion. Yeah, you learn to see the biases. This is about, I think, social consciousness. We learn to see these in the workplace. So that's very important for us to see that. And then, of course, empathy and being non-judgmental when we listen to people. I think that's very key to understanding those around us. And as leaders, it is important to respond, of course, and take accountability for what we have learned or what we have seen, right? So be attentive to the voices that we hear and also be attentive to the voices that are being silenced in the workplace. So yeah, I think that's it for men. Now for women, I totally agree with Vahe. I think he captured a lot of the things that I wanted to share, but I also would probably add on um, to Vahe about sharing their own stories. By
Mhm.
sharing their own stories, they get to learn um, about themselves, and also they are themselves promoting the inclusion environment that we are building. Right. So for me, each and every one of us can facilitate and enable the belongingness for people around us or in the workplace, and
Thank
not
you.
just the people, the
Thank
managers,
you.
or the people on top.
Thank you very much. Again, articulating, sharing your own story, right? Being vocal on it, sharing your own experience to the world, and letting the people to know you better. Bartek, anything else on your side which you would add to these tips or tips to us women to be more successful from what you heard from Vahe and Eric?
Uh, I think it's the self confidence. It's I think it's absolutely clue. If we look at the differences between women and men, there is always the payroll that is popping up as part of the difference. Fortunately, for example, in Poland, I was really actually surprised that it's less than 5%. In European Union, it's 30%. That means that uh, in Poland the industry is growing really fast. But still there is still difference, and maybe women are simply too humble. It's Although Patrick Lencioni says the ideal team player, it's about being humble, hungry, and smart. So there is always a mix between those three values, and whichever is stronger, they must be in ideal balance. All those three. So if I would point this imbalance would be more hungry and less humble. That will probably fix a little bit balance. And in men case, be more humble. Definitely, that would be something fixing. And I would also point out something else as because I mentioned values that are they're absolutely pillars of every organization and every company. And trust is something that it's really challenging as far as diversity. And I will refer to some Indian spiritual leader, Sadhguru. Probably you're familiar. He's very famous also in social media. And I think he's nailing the trust, and he says that trust should empower people, not limit them. He says that trust does not mean that that someone have to behave the way we expect him to behave, and this is about. So we must trust that the new value, the new approach, the new version of the world that she is bringing or he's bringing, and it's not fully aligned with what we expect them to behave. It's the real trust, that it's trust that stands behind the inclusion, and this is. I could also rephrase any romantic comedy. I think you complete us, and this is that says it all. It's about completing the picture and completing our skill set as a team.
Thank you. I like the idea of bringing the bless you, Eric, of bringing the the completion context, because indeed we are different, but we are complementary to each other, right? And I think that makes this world so amazing. Thank you, Bartosz. The last thing is, again, I really hope we did not, our people did not go to sleep, at least in Poland. There is a storm. You probably hear, the storm in my place. It only shows we are really live, guys. We are really live. But seriously, we have like a few minutes left. And I wish to hear from you before the final closure, one thing which you did in your journey, just shortly, for the women in particular, to create these equal opportunities for them as men got. All of you were very vocal on this context of equal opportunities. Bartek was the loudest, and I really appreciate that. It's not about the equal outcome, because each of us is accountable for the outcome, right? But you say the equal opportunities are so critical. So Vahe, what did you do? One thing that you are mostly proud of to create these equal opportunities?
I think we discussed about, let's say, the intentionality of how to think about diversity and inclusion in an organization, in the company. And so I think that the key thing, when I think maybe when I was leading Western Europe at Microsoft, we had 70% of my general managers and my vice presidents were female leaders. And so it's at some point you walk the talk, exposing, giving the opportunity, empowering them to take decisions, build the confidence that then create followership. I think that has been the biggest thing. People who might have some cliche or wrong, interpretation, or are doubtful about the why of we were spending so much time on this. That was the best example. People were blown away, and because of different way of thinking. But it starts with the intention and the willingness to make it happen, because of this belief that you are going to make a difference. And then when you do it well, you create, in fact, so much, let's say, scale and force multiplier. So I think that's the one thing that has been quite consistent in Asia, in the US, or in Europe when I was there.
So you say, thank you so much, consistency, building on your real intent and belief, and making it happen, right?
Give exposure, empower.
Give exposure and empower. The empowerment comes from your mind. And I could only confirm it. Eric, what did you do in your journey? One thing which you are mostly proud of in this particular context?
I would say that giving our women the voice, giving them equal opportunity to succeed, is really something that I am proud of. And you know this, Gosha, that we have built a team in the Philippines here, a very strong one. And women are actually a huge part of our success, right?
I
So
confirm.
to the leaders, I think we will only be as successful as far as how we are able to develop our people, both men and women, right? So it's I think it's not just about hiring the right people with the right skills and talents, but getting them together to work for the company's objectives, our own objectives, and making them um, align with the vision of the company and work together as one team.
So you say this togetherness, right? And creating the momentum for people, even if they are different, right? They act together for the common purpose. You say this is really the role which you did. And I
Exactly.
definitely confirm you did, my friend, you did. Bartek, the last but not least, in this context, what did you do personally for this equality for women and men that you are mostly proud of?
Of course, except for building open and inclusive organization culture, because I strongly believe that culture is strategy for breakfast. Of course, it's absolutely crucial to build this organization, but also supporting work-life balance through flexible hours, having in mind also those differences that are between men and women. It's very important. But I must say there is one thing that it's very important, and it's combating discrimination in any shape or form. So it has to be very clear that such behavior will not be tolerated in any way. So it's also part of the culture. If something happens which is very tough decision, but there is no space for any discrimination shape or form, that also defines the rules of organization. And I think it's very important, not only the soft approach and building awareness, building culture, but setting some very straight rules as well.
Thank you. Thanks so much. And I think it's so important. And I think I have to stress it even more, quoting Bartek, no allowance, no approval for any act of discrimination on board. We have to be strict and clear and act upon it. Gentlemen, before we close, I wish to hear from each and every of you one word, just one word. I know it's not easy, but you are super smart guys. That is going to stay with our audiences in all of the regions who are with us today. You want them to leave with one word of your reflection as a gift to them to remember. Within the topic of diversity and inclusion, and us women in your discussion and decision table, or rather in our decision table. So, Eric, I'll start with you. One word.
I'd say
Speed up,
quality.
speed up.
Equality would be my word.
Equality. Bartek, what's on your mind?
Well, I would probably say "Vive la différence," as it's more than one word.
It's
But
Viva would be happy, yeah?
but probably since I mentioned Sanguru, I would say trust is is something that helps if we don't understand, and of course taking into consideration all those differences that we've talked about. The trust is something that will help us to get along. I mean, to build organization that is diverse. So I will go with trust, especially Tiger. values. It's trust, innovation, growth, energy, and
Okay,
responsibility.
we have
it's our
quality, we have trust.
So that's
And Vahe, what's on your mind?
Yeah, I would say maybe if it's one word, I would say reach out.
Reach out. Don't be shy. Reach out.
Don't be shy. Be self-confident. If you don't try, you will not know.
Too many. One or two.
Reach out.
Reach out. Coming from Bartek, trust, and coming from Eric, equality. Gentlemen, thank you so much. I so much appreciate. I know that you spent your night, so middle of the night with us, or very early morning, or very late afternoon. I really hope that you enjoyed. I really hope that all of our audiences enjoyed. Guys, I wish you all the wonderful journey with building diverse and inclusive organizations. And I cannot be more grateful than to say thank you, salamat and dziękuję to all three of you of spending this my afternoon with me. It's an honor and a pleasure for me. And I felt challenged as well during this conversation, which is great. So bye-bye to our audiences, and please stay for a while with me, the trio.